Welcome along to the latest edition of Rugby League Bat Chat. We're here at the Pit Sports Bar in Leeds, and joining us this week, the publisher of League Weekly, Danny Lockwood, the legend, Garry Schofield, and the managing editor of 4020 magazine, none other than Phil Caplan. Welcome along. I say we're in the pit in Leeds, we could be in the crisis in Leeds, couldn't we? Because I can't pick up a newspaper without hearing that Leeds are in crisis, and this week they have sacked their head coach, Brian McDermott. Gary Hetherington, CEO, saying, always disappointed to announce the departure of someone who's contributed so much to our club's success, and Brian has done that. He's our club's most successful coach, 8 years, a long time for any head coach at the same club. We've enjoyed much success, enjoyed difficult times, but we do believe our present predicament requires change, and this is the right call for the club. Now, Brian McDermott, normally in these circumstances, you get something like saying, I wish the club all the best, but the quote from Brian McDermott is, I'm extremely disappointed this has happened, and obviously it's not a decision I agree with. But he does wish everyone at the club the best, and thoughts will be the team on Sunday, where they play Castleford. Right, our man close to the Leeds camp, Phil Caplan. I think a lot of people thought, well, he must be under pressure here because it's the worst run they've ever had in the Super League. They lost 7 on the trot. Maybe they'll wait to the Cup semi-final. I don't think many people thought that Mr. McDermott would be fired off this week. Did you see that as a possibility? No, shocked, surprised, in some way saddened in the manner in which it was done. He doesn't get to go out perhaps in the manner in which he deserves, bearing in mind he's been there 8 years and delivered 8 trophies. Very un-Leeds-like as well. The Garry Hetherington, Paul Caddick era has all been about succession planning. On a playing front as well as a coaching front. The only coach they've sacked in the summer era was Dean Lance. And again, that was partly for matters outside of how they were performing on the field. Well, so McLennan... Yeah, but he left at the end of the season, having delivered grand finals. Brian McDermott already in there to take over. Yes, so, and Brian McDermott had already been an assistant under Tony Smith. So there's always been this element that the future of the club was in some way determined in advance. This seems to be a reaction to a particularly bad performance at Wigan. I think a lot of the displays in the run-up to that could have gone either way. I think there was a feeling that, again, with some of the players that they don't have available to them at the moment that were coming back, that would rectify itself. So I think it was a surprise. But of course, you'll only be able to determine whether it's the right decision when we know who the replacement is. Well, so you're going to judge the decision based on the outcome later? I think that's the only way you can, who the person is that they must have in mind to come in and take the role. Well, unfortunately, the club don't we'll talk about that later, but the club don't have the benefit of waiting until the outcome to decide whether it was right or not, like anyone else. Now, Scully, who literally overused the word literally in the wrong sense, literally bleeds blue and amber. What did you make of it all? I mean, I think you seem to be in your column in the newspaper, the League Express, that you're anti-McDermott, are you? Is that fair to say?
No, it's very surprising, and I say, as Phil's mentioned.
But do you think it's a good decision?
No, I don't. If I'm
don't you?
No, I don't. And I think at times Brian has been a little bit too loyal to some of these players who have been performing, and I think the players have let him down. And certainly that performance against Wigan last Thursday night was, well, to be honest with you, it was pathetic. And the way that some players are, I would imagine, because I know myself with coaches who have lost their jobs in my days. It's simple. Some players will be happy, some players won't be. But I'm surprised at it, and now the question is the players to respond? Right. You can't keep blaming coaches all the time. Surprised about him getting sacked, but now it's a challenge for the players because one thing for sure, Rod, and I know Danny and Phil will be the same from a point of view. They've got 4 games left. Yes. Cass and Wakefield, it's not a shoo-in. They will want to send Leeds to the bottom 4, and then they've got Widnes and Salford. Yes. Widnes and Salford will want them in the bottom 4. Nothing to do with the coach at Leeds. It's all about the players, and that is a challenge for them. Well, Scully says, he's been sacked over the years, and we should judge it on the outcome and the result later. Now, Huddersfield foolishly got rid of Garry Schofield and ended up with someone like Tony Smith. I mean, we know how that worked out. Yeah. So,
Sky for Leeds.
But seriously, what's your take on it? Well, you've always got a view.
You use the word crisis to kick us off here, Rod.
I'm being a little tongue-in-cheek.
And I think of all the clubs that you could apply crisis to, wherever they are in the league, like Warrington were. Yes. I would say it wouldn't apply to Leeds. Of all the individuals in Rugby League and Super League management, the one person that you would not say is prone to fits of melodrama is Garry Hetherington. I didn't see it coming like everybody else. Did I think it was the right decision? Well, I think if it had been any other club, we'd have been saying, how is he still there? Yeah. Because it isn't a good team. We know all about the injury problems, but other sides have that as well. I think sometimes a person with Gary Hetherington's kind of astute understanding of the game will say, that guy's lost the changing room. There's something not right here. I would be very surprised, and we don't know at this point, but I would be very surprised if Gary hasn't got something up his sleeve, because that's the kind of guy he is. But for right now, they do have an existential crisis. They've got to find some result from somewhere.
I mean, the fact is that they're still very unlikely. Bookmakers will offer you 3-1 that they will be in the bottom 4. So it shows that it's not very likely to be in the bottom 4. They currently have got their head above water on points difference above Huddersfield. But as Gary's rightly pointed out, they've got a home game against Widnes, which they'll see as a banker, won't they? And they've got a game against Salford, and if they've won those 2 games, there'll be no chance of them being in the bottom 4. So is this a panic?
Rod, that's there's not clear gimmies. Them 2 games. No, but as I've said, they are not clear.
Yeah, but if they can't, against the previous Leeds team, they wouldn't have been.
Let's be honest. If you can't beat Widnes at home, then you're in trouble, aren't you?
But that's the question right now. Right. You would say, can they beat Widnes?
Well, I'd like evens that they beat Widnes at home. Right?
I think it's partly.
Is it a panic? This?
I suspect that when you look at the way they've gone about the business in the Caddick-Hetherington era, there's always been a plan in place. But I'm not 100% surprised that on Thursday night, when it was a rabbits in the headlights game that I don't think anybody saw coming on the basis of the fact that the 2 previous performances, they'd run St Helens and Caplan very close with a weakened team. Yeah. I suspect that they looked at that and thought, is there a crisis of confidence amongst the players? I think the key words in Gary Hetherington's statement is change of direction at this critical time in the season. What does it mean by change of direction? Obviously it means they want to travel up the league rather than down, but does that mean a philosophy needs to change, an attitude needs to change within that group that he didn't think Brian McDermott could engender?
We'll talk about this later, about what Leeds are going to do next, but why does anybody think there's any real evidence for changing your coach will change the results?
I think it's more to do with,
because they're the same players are going to be on the pitch.
Absolutely,
which is what Scully was saying.
Yeah, it's more to do with who is going to come back at the critical part.
Right,
because the one thing that we haven't mentioned is that whoever does take over could be leading the team out of Wembley in 2 months.
Somebody's got to get a response, and you said, does changing the coach make a difference? Well, you see it in football certainly all the time, far more than you do in rugby. But there is a dynamic that's got to change, I think, in that changing room. You looked at that side. It was the first time, I think, throughout this 7-match losing streak that Brian McDermott was, I thought, honest and said it really was poor and it wasn't good enough. He'd been proud of them for weeks on end, when actually I wouldn't have been as a coach. So I just think that Gary Hetherington is looking at it and saying, where's the leadership? Where is the person that can change the direction here? We don't think he can.
But also as well, Danny and Phil, Leeds, and the players who were coming back, they haven't got players who were coming back as match winners. Don't get me wrong, the Warriors, right? Jamie Jones, Delaney, Carl Abler, and Phil's favourite player, Stevie Ward. They are not match winners. They are not creative players where they're going to get us the 2 points and the results what we're looking for.
They need experience out there. They need leadership.
How much experience have they got now, Phil?
They've got 5 kids. 5 kids who could be playing in the academy at the moment.
Right. He gave an extraordinary interview, I don't know if you saw it, to Angela Powers after the match, where it was just bizarre. Do you think he had an inkling that, in that sense, that he was this was going to be the end? Or?
No, I think this has all been generated on the Friday morning. Right, I think the perceived wisdom is that there was a long meeting between Gary Hetherington and Brian McDermott on the Sunday. So I suspect that Brian's reaction. And isn't it nice not to have a mealy-mouthed statement where it's all done by mutual agreement, but Brian is actually coming out and saying, I don't agree with it.
It's a rarity, isn't it, to see a coach sacked as opposed to mutually consented.
And I admire that on both parties.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, we'll come back to what Lee's going to do later in the second part of the show, but what I want to say, let's just talk about Brian McDermott. And he, because of the trophies won, is listed as the most successful coach, 4 grand final wins, 2 Challenge Cups, League Leader Shield and the World Club Challenge. But if you look at the league placings, he's been 5th, 5th, 3rd, 6th, 1st, 9th, 2nd and currently 8th. And if you look at the points picked up per game, he's down at 1.18 when Tony Smith is at 1.52, McLennan 1.47 and Darryl Powell 1.28 at Leeds. So how good a coach is Brian McDermott, and how good a coach is he at Leeds?
Well, listen, I've said it many times. Coaches don't make players; it's players who make coaches.
Right.
And you look at the players what Leeds have had, and some of the best players that's ever played for the club. As we know, with Sinfield, Maguire, Burrow, Lola White, Ryan Hall, and what have you. So coaches don't make the players; it's the players who make the coaches. And plus, as well, it's a structure what we have, isn't it? You know, if you are literally 8-10 points behind where Leeds have won the competition, what, from 4th and 5th? Well, in other sports,
twice,
in other sports, you don't get anywhere near, do you? No. But it's because of the structure, the quality of the players, that has what won them, certainly. The grand final is what they've won for this sport.
I think there's been a perfect storm. Obviously, it was a perfect storm 2 years ago when they had their Kirkstall training.
Oh, yes, of course.
Literally
The fact that the training ground was flooded was the reason why they did so poorly.
And that's the reason
so
they
what's
had
the reason
disaster.
there's been no floods this year, has there?
No, I think you can go back to one crucial decision that I think's been fundamental in this, which was Gary Hetherington not matching what Hull Kingston Rovers were going to give Danny Maguire.
Right.
They lost Maguire, who was arguably, to me, the key part of their leadership group, post-Peacock, post-Sinfield. And I think that you do need someone like that to hold things together on the field. So I just think that the perfect storm. Is Brian McDermott a great coach? I think he's a very limited coach, personally.
Right, okay.
But I think that he inherited the best team that Leeds have had in more than a generation, and he's lost those players one by two.
But those players need managing as well, in the same way that was Alex Ferguson a great coach because he had all the great players playing for Manchester United.
He managed Manchester United through 3 or 4 different invocations.
And Brian McDermott, in the 8 years he's been there, has built at least 2 teams, was on his way to bringing a third.
Finishing top to win.
No, not when he first started.
Yeah, but if they didn't finish top, Alex Ferguson would be out.
Well, they didn't win every year.
I think Leeds lack talent on the field, and as great a coach as
I'm interested in what Scotty was saying about the structure and things. Now, has the structure and the opportunity to win from 5th and lower down the table masked the deficiencies of Brian McDermott and Leeds, or is he an absolute master of playing that system and managing his team brilliantly in knockout games, where he's got 12 wins in 15 Super League knockout ties and 19 wins in 24 Challenge Cup ties? So is he a master of that facet of the game?
Should the opinion that we take not be the ones of the players that have played under him? Indeed. So when you talk to somebody like Kevin Sinfield, who has played under a range of exceptionally good domestic coaches, he rates Brian McDermott as the best coach he's played under.
And that's fair enough, that says it all.
Right.
Should that not be the opinion that we take? I also think that tactically in important games, he has come up with game plans that have won them, which I think you say is limited.
When he frankly bored the liver out of everybody at Wembley, didn't he? But it was a masterstroke of performance because they strangled Castleford.
What about last year, having turned around from being a team that were in danger of relegation to winning the competition, moving Joel Moon to stand off? Again, it created something that the team hadn't previously had up till then. So I would say the apprenticeship that he served at Leeds served him in good stead under Tony Smith. I think the work that he did in London to develop the game, which currently isn't happening, I think we underestimated at the time. He did a terrific job down there in the capital with very limited resources, and I would say that his record stands the test of time, that he might not be the greatest Leeds coach, but in terms of trophies, which is how you judged, he is the best.
Yeah, I mean, have they had it's unfair to say they were lucky, but did they have luck along the way? People remember against Warrington in 2011 when Steve Ganson pulled a penalty at the last minute and Warrington lost.
I think what you forget...
Hardacre didn't play the grand final. Samkins didn't play in a big playoff game for Wigan against them and Leeds won by a point. Have they had a little bit of luck along the way?
I think what you forget
is that... That's sport, isn't it? That happens.
And the history of the Leeds club is that they have historically been a cup team. They haven't been consistent in the league throughout the 120 years they've been in existence.
And most certainly as well, last year in the grand final, it didn't matter if Hardacre would have played. Leeds would have beaten
it would have made a bit of a difference.
No, I don't think it would have made a lot of difference the way that Leeds played that night.
I think the other thing that we haven't discussed is who actually signs the players. So I know that Brian McDermott has an input into who is recruited, but that does come from the board.
And I think as you look at the Leeds squad now, notwithstanding the injuries, I think that looks pretty thin on real quality, on star quality. And that's what's cost him his job.
But the upside of that is that there are 5 youngsters getting an opportunity at the moment, some of whom, particularly 2 you'd say, Jack Walker and Mikolaj Aledski, who look like they could be there for a very long time, could be the next golden generation. They've come through under a Brian McDermott system. Yeah,
I mean, so we'll come more onto this recruitment in the next part, but is that the real problem at Leeds, not the coach, that they haven't signed good enough players?
Yeah, there's not goal.
That's the real problem, isn't it?
Well, like for like, have they?
Yeah.
But having said that, how can you replace Sinfield? How can you replace Maguire? How can you replace Biro? And now there's going to be a few more going. Certainly, Delaney's been brilliant for Leeds as an overseas player. JJB, whether he's going to decide to stay, Carl Ablett definitely is going to be leaving. So it's a generation from there, and the quality coming through from Leeds in the background. To be honest with you, Rod, Danny, Phil, I'm not hearing it, to be honest. So it could be.
I mean, Gary Hetherington is famously rather frugal, I think, when it comes to splashing the cash, isn't he?
Really?
Yeah, I believe so.
I think he plays the salary cap system perfectly.
Perfectly. Okay, whatever it is, it's cost them this year.
Well, the one thing they won't do is they will not sign a marquee player. Right. Now, that's probably a debate.
Right, okay, just finally, because we've got to go to a break, but Brian McDermott, marks out of 10 for his tenure at Leeds coach. Garry Schofield?
8.
9.
8.
Very good. Very good. So that means he's been a very successful coach, if not the most successful coach. It's hard to get those kind of marks out of Lockwood, Caplan and Schofield. Right, we must take a break. We'll be back to discuss more about the Leeds Rhino situation and what they're going to do next, who they'll turn to as a coach perhaps. Join us in a couple of minutes. Welcome back to a Rugby League Back Chat from the Pit Sports Bar here in Leeds, and Leeds is very much the epicentre of the rugby league world this week with the champions sacking their coach Brian McDermott. We talked about it in part 1, but what I want to talk about now is what Leeds are going to do next. Let me give you the betting on the next Leeds head coach. 9-4 favourite David Ferner, currently at Souths as assistant. 11-4 Daryl Powell. In from 50-1, the Casford head coach. 5-1 Dennis Betts, recently relieved of his duties at Widnes, and 10-1 Jason Demetriou. Look, these markets are very much fluid, and you wouldn't have to put very much on because they won't lay very big bets. And a fiver from someone in the know like Phil Caplan would shift a coach's odds in from 20-1 to 4-7. But what do you make of those guys at the head of the list there?
Yeah, I think they're probably quite predictable in terms of same old. There'd be a fond welcome back for Daryl Powell if he chose to give up the gig at Castleford, but my understanding is that the manner in which he eventually left Leeds will probably still sour him to that. I don't know.
Just elaborate on that. He was the head coach in 2003 when they got within that of reaching the grand final. They lost to Wigan by a point.
And lost in the Challenge Cup final.
Yes. And then he got kicked upstairs into the rugby union side of the outfit. Then he reinvented himself at Featherstone. And then created the great Castleford team of the last couple of years that we've seen. Right. And which, by the way, I think has been a progressive development at Castleford. I don't think it was just last year. I think that he, for my money, is the up-and-coming British coach. But at the same time, I think that we can probably cast our net wider than that. And if your bookies wanted an outsider, Rod, and I know you always like it, I got a text last night saying that the name Wayne Bennett might not be. Hold the front page. Might not be too outlandish.
Wayne Bennett.
You're
right.
The thing is that if it's taken at face value that they need a change of direction and they need it now because of the predicament they're in, they can't be looking for somebody who they want to appoint in 2019.
Great point.
So who is actually available now? Well, over here, there's only really one coach. That's Sean Wayne, who we know is moving on from Wigan.
Well, Dennis Betts is available.
Yeah.
Literally.
I would be surprised if he was in the thinking of the Leeds management.
Well, anyone's available if you've got enough money to compensate the club who's currently employing the coach.
But I'm not sure that Leeds have that money and had planned to have that money. So I think you might be looking at Australia as your first route. I think you're looking then at assistant coaches who can be released immediately rather than head coaches. And there are two candidates, one of whom obviously is David Ferner. Goes back to the succession plan we were talking about in part 1. there's nobody at the moment, I think, on the Leeds coaching staff that could step up and take the role, but there are two really good up-and-coming young coaches at the start of their development, Chev Walker and Rob Burrow, who played with David Ferner in 2004 in the grand final. So you can almost see a succession plan there. I think the other person who might be available because of his links with the club would be Danny Lockwood, who currently is assistant coach in New South Wales to Origin Series win. He's doing a similar job at Newcastle, but absolutely loved his time at Leeds, got a close bond and affinity with the people here. Yeah. The only other one to throw into the mix as, an outside Wayne Bennett bet, what about a swap with Hull KR? That Brian McDermott joins his good friend as a director of rugby there, Jamie Peacock. Right. A lot of the Hull KR players have come up through the Leeds system. Right. And Tim Sheens ends his career over here.
I've heard of player swap deals, Scully, but I've not heard of coach swap deals. Have you?
I just thought I'd throw that one.
I like the sound of that.
No, that's bonkers for Phil Caplan.
Well, fair enough.
Listen, that's bonkers for Phil Caplan. But I'd say that who I'd like to see at Leeds, and he played there when I was there and all, and that Leeds are looking to go to a different new direction. And we know he's leaving Rugby League now, he's going to Rugby Union, but I would imagine if Sean Wayne was offered the Leeds job on a 3.5-year deal, we'll look at a new direction, this word in sport now, culture. Wayne, it's a rebuilding situation now for Leeds. I'll tell you what, I would love to see Sean Wayne stay in the game of Rugby League, come and be the coach of the biggest club in the game from there. Well, change that sort of culture what Leeds have got now. 3.5-year deal, and I reckon he would still bring success.
What, you think that Leeds could persuade him to? Well, what effectively would be to renege on his agreement to join the Scottish Rugby Union.
But he's only a consultant. He's only been employed as a consultant. Yes. And I suspect that within his contract, although I have no knowledge of this, that there would be a release should he want to.
And I reckon, because Wigan don't want him, it's quite clear now, Wigan don't want him, and I reckon Wayne, he wants to stay in Rugby League, given the opportunity of coaching Leeds, 3.5-year deal. I'll tell you what, mate, come and join us.
Certainly within our game, it seems to be a bit of a merry-go-round, doesn't it? It's like, okay, you should, like at my golf club at the end of the year, just all throw your putter in the middle, boys. Pull out a new one and that'll cure you for next year. Right. Because that's what we're talking about. We're not really seeing development of coaches and talent coming through. Okay, if you bring in a Ferner over, you're only doing what Huddersfield have done with Simon Wolford, what Saints did with Justin Holbrook. Are we really?
Leeds is interesting though, because being 100 years old, I can remember when people like Peter Fox and Malcolm Reilly came to Leeds, who were quite clearly the best coaches of their era, but they didn't last long there because it's the environment that you're operating in. It's not about whether you're a good coach or not. There is an inordinate amount of pressure on being the coach of Leeds, both from the media, who, why we're having a debate for at least half of this programme about Leeds, because they're a big club, it's a big story, but also there's an expectation of fans that they play in a certain way. And it doesn't suit all coaches. So,
right, okay,
yes,
so that's a good point. So what about Wayne there? Because you only got to look on social media for Wigan fans the last couple of years saying our attack's boring, it's rubbish, we've got there's nothing exciting about watching Wigan.
I was a little bit critical myself, and everybody was last year. And had to change.
But would Leeds fans want Sean Wayne? They might want his winning and his success, but
which is what they've had with Brian McDermott.
Do they want the style?
Yeah, well, I think the way that we're going to play this year, when he can play an attacking game, if he's got the right players, if he's got the right ammo, who can play an attacking philosophy, Sean Wayne's a man for me for Leeds. Right, okay.
Well, they certainly ran Leeds ragged last week.
Did they?
That wasn't bulldozing. That was.
But I think it goes back to people like John Duffy, maybe Richard Marshall, James Ford. All of these people will deserve a job in Super League, but is it the Leeds job? On the basis of the fact that
Leeds is too big for them, Phil, at this moment in
time. I think Danny's right. We need to develop British coaches. I think the issue for Leeds at the moment is that they don't have one coming through the ranks who you could promote, and that's why it was again an odd statement when it came out on the Monday morning. There was no mention of who was actually even taking charge of the team this weekend.
That's right. That's extraordinary, isn't it? Because every time a coach gets sacked, be it in football or rugby league, the statement always says we've parted company with X and Y will take temporary charge of the team starting at Castleford on Sunday. That's always what happens. I think that hasn't happened, has it?
One of the explanations Garry Hetherington gave when he fronted the media on Monday was the fact that the players aren't in again until Wednesday afternoon, and he would want to tell the players first. Now, I'm not sure that is a valid reason. No, right. But I don't. You would think that maybe in terms of experience within the club, James Lowes will lead the team on Sunday. Technically, James Lowes isn't employed officially.
Hasn't he just been sacked as the rugby union coach or left as the rugby union coach?
By
Garry Hetherington.
What's a
tangled web?
Tangled webs we weave.
Right, yeah, okay. So the whole thing's, not to know, a matter of, hours before they play on Sunday who's coaching the team. And this is the champion team, not some sort of, ragtag and bobtail team. It's extraordinary.
But notice has now been served, hasn't it? Everybody in that organisation, if they want to be here next year, you've got to book your ideas up. And whoever, even if it's Garry Hetherington himself who walks into the changing room and says, right, here's your 17 boys, and I want this out of you. And Garry Hetherington could do that, by the way. I think that they know now that the spotlight is shining very firmly.
I'm just scanning the list for G. Hetherington.
Just below G. Schofield.
Hey, listen, I actually tried to place a bet on Marwan Kukash coaching Salford at one point because I thought that was likely, but Garry Hetherington...
I thought he was.
So, I mean, anything is possible.
The interesting thing is, I think the Rob Burrow dynamic comes into play at some stage. Rob has only just started on his role, and it's not just the under-19 team who are playing very well at the moment, and some of those players are coming through. He's in charge of the whole scholarship and academy system. There was clearly a difference of opinion between him and Brian McDermott, which came out in the film that was produced, which I don't think did Brian any favours either. And I think Rob now gets a pathway of development. He's probably not quite ready yet to be the head coach. But I think whatever this appointment is, has to bear in mind the fact that they have somebody in their organisation who could be the head coach in a couple of years' time.
Right, I tell you what, then, the great scenario is there, because when Wigan fell down a little bit from an attacking point of view, Paul Dickey went to Rebuning, right? That's right, yeah. Sean Wayne at Leeds for 3.5 years, with Rob Burrow, Chev Walker, where he's there for 3.5 years, big the success, moves on, leaves it in good hands. Robbie Burrow is the attack coach and then the assistant. What a great solution. What a great solution for Leeds.
I think Schofield for Leeds, for Director of Rugby Consultant.
Have you got the number, Garry Hetherington?
I tell you what, Danny, I think that's around about 5 million.
Do you think that Sean Wade would want to coach Leeds?
I
know he's fallen out big time with...
I think he would run it. When he came to Leeds under David Wall, because we had a great atmosphere in that dressing room, Wayne absolutely loved it. And I tell you what, I reckon he would jump at the chance. You know, Sean has said he wants a new challenge. Tell you what, boy oh boy, isn't this a challenge? What you want to keep Leeds at the top?
And isn't there a personality thing around the Leeds thing as well?
Absolutely.
That you have got to fit with. You've got to be big, and you've got to be able to fit with Garry Hetherington. And I think that Sean Wayne is that kind of alpha male that could have a really good, robust.
Do you think Wigan would release him now? Because Leeds need a coach for, if not this Sunday, certainly the week after.
Hey, look, Wigan don't want him, so quite easy. Sean
I think he wanted to be released earlier this season. Bear in mind, Scotland Rugby Union had a tour to Argentina, and I think his preferred option was maybe to move to be released earlier, but Wigan don't want that disruption in the middle of the season.
So if they won't release him...
Bear in mind, Wigan are still a pretty good chance of reaching the grand final, aren't they? Obviously, they're going to be in the top 4 team, aren't they?
So the other route Leeds could go down is to appoint an interim until they get the man they want for 2019. It's a dangerous game to go down.
Which is what Wigan may do in 2019 before they can get the man they want in 2020.
Which interims are available? Because, again, some of the word coming back is they should ask Tony Smith to come and look after the team for 3 years. I can't see that happening, personally.
I'm not sure Mr. Smith is too keen to get back into the front line, as it were, is he?
But is there an interim coach out there?
Tony Smith would be a good interim coach, but I'm not sure.
It comes down to personality.
Well, Dennis Betts had that problem at Wigan himself, didn't he? When he was then
absolutely
sort of at Wigan in loco parentis, if you like, and then was booted out of Wigan. So.
It's all a question of how many doors have you slammed behind.
Right, it is. I'll tell you what I want to know, because Phil used the phrase expectation at Leeds, and is the expectation at Leeds actually too high? And by that I mean that Leeds' wage bill isn't the highest in the competition. I would say that there's at least 3 teams. Wigan, Warrington, St Helens have certainly got higher wage bills than Leeds with their utilisation of the marquee player. I think probably the Catalans have as well. So Leeds' wage bill is only maybe 5th, 6th. So should fans actually either want them to spend more or say, well, hang on, we can't expect to be right up there with these teams?
I think they need to...
I know they're Leeds, but they're not spending.
There needs to be a good story and a narrative around it, doesn't it? You know, they've gone from being champions to finishing bottom 4, champions, could be bottom 4. Those fans have stuck with them through thick and thin. But I think they just need to be convinced that there's a plan and that there's...
Are they paying for about a 4th or 5th finish?
I think you need to define the word expectation.
Right.
It's not... With the current generation, because they have been trophy-laden, there are some Leeds fans who have only been bred on success. But the expectation I was referring to was more the entertainment principle, the way in which they play. Historically, and Garry will tell you this much better than I can, Leeds fans will accept a 25-24 defeat more than they will accept a 2-0 victory. provided the wingers are scoring tries.
I'm not sure if anyone ever accepts that, do they? I think it's a bit of a myth.
No, I think if you look back at the history of the Leeds club...
When you were playing, would you think, well, that was good, we lost 24-25 and it could have been worse, we could have won 2-0? We could have been worse, we could have won 2-0.
Because nowadays it was all about winning pay, losing pay, wasn't it? So no.
I thought he was going to say in your day it was 3 points for a try, Scully, so those scores were less likely.
The point you make about spending money is really interesting because I think what determines your season at this time is if you can go out and sign a player.
Right.
So you look at Kenny Edwards, who's coming at Catalan, Junior Vaivai at Hull KR, perhaps what Joe Greenwood will now do at Wigan. What James Seguiaro did in 2016 when he came to us might not have been the right fit, but he was certainly the right player that they needed for that 8 weeks of the season.
Well, they had a good run, didn't they, when he arrived,
And he was the catalyst for it. Should Leeds not only just be looking at a new coach, do they need to go out and find the money to sign a player? Right,
which is back to our point in the first part of the thing. Is it not about the coach? The most important person at any sports club is the person that recruits the players. And that at Leeds is?
Garry Hetherington.
Chris Gibson and Garry Hetherington.
Right, okay, so should Leeds fans be asking Mr. Hetherington, well, why aren't we signing better players?
Or should
why are you blaming the coach?
Or should they be asking Mr. Caddick?
All right, but shouldn't they be saying, why are you blaming Brian McDermott? Why aren't you signing better players instead of blaming our coach?
Doesn't all this come back to one basic point, Rod? Is it plan or is it panic?
Right.
I think that's the question that we don't know the answer to, and it might be the next week or so before we do.
You won't know until the next coach is revealed.
And I know what a lot of these fans are saying to me, Scully, why is Maguire? Well, why is Maguire at OKR and we've got Richie Myler? There you go.
Well, I mean, presumably they didn't want to pay Danny Maguire what he could earn elsewhere, and Danny quite rightly took the view that at this stage of his career he wanted some more money.
But Myler's younger, but I think there was still
it's
this
It's all about quality of play.
I think he's done a better job than I expected this year.
Leading the assists.
You must be watching a different player to me then.
My expectations weren't that high, Gary. But the thing is, you're right. I think Danny Maguire should still be there. I said it earlier, but that frugality that is part of the Hetherington psyche is gonna come to play in this next few weeks.
We've also seen, of course, this row between seemingly Leeds and the other 11 Super League clubs. There will be those who are sitting there saying, well, there could be a supreme irony because by the time they come round to have another vote on these matters, that Leeds might not even have a vote as a Super League club, but they're not going to be in the bottom four to get relegated.
But listen as well, you know this with the Leeds scenario, I said it a few weeks ago to what Elson said about Leeds when he was at Widnes and Salford. He's talking about elitism. Hey, listen, this is Leeds Super League club, so don't try and become too heavy with them because they are the biggest club in the game and it's an absolute nonsense. It's just total disrespect. Not just to Garry Hetherington, who's the best administrator in the game, by the way, also to Leeds Rugby League.
And on that note, before Scully gets even more apoplectic about any kind of criticism of the Leeds Rhinos, we must take a breather and put him in a dark room and toweling down with a wet copy of League Express. Back in a couple of minutes.
Don't miss Backchat on July 26th on FreeSports. One of the biggest names in the game, Maurice Lindsay, the former chief executive, the man who shaped Super League, will be with us, and the man who's hoping to shape the future of Super League, Robert Elston, the new chief executive, will also be joining us too. So don't miss it. July 26th, FreeSports, Backchat.
Welcome back to Rugby League Backchat from the Pit Sports Bar here in Leeds. We've discussed a lot about Leeds, and Leeds are in crisis, but there seems to be a lot of clubs in financial crisis in Rugby League. In fact, Danny, I mean, you can barely pick up a paper without another club saying, we're hours away from going out of business. We've seen Barrow, we've seen Keighley, we've seen Whitehaven. Yeah. How concerning is that so many clubs are suddenly coming out and saying, well, we're in turmoil?
I don't think there's anything new to this. We seem to have a cluster of them at the moment, Rod, but if you go back through the history of the sport, there's rarely a year when we don't have somebody that's appealing to the fans. You know, the multitude of dramas that surrounded Bradford Bulls, who had no reason to be in the trouble that they were. And all I can put it down to is the fact that all of these guys who are erstwhile successful businessmen within their own fields of endeavour turn up at a sports club, and particularly a rugby league club, take their financial brains out, put them in a jar by the door and go in and just play spend. And I don't know what it is, but it is a particular problem within our game.
I think there's an element missing here, and that is that there is an assumption that you have fans to appeal to. I think there has been some serious socio-economic and demographic changes that have affected the north of England in particular, and that when clubs get into financial trouble, they assume that there are people out there who have just lapsed. I think we need to do a lot more research around the sport about why people aren't coming to rugby league anymore. The habit has been broken in a lot of these places. There's a generational gap in a lot of them as well, and you can't just appeal if you're getting 500 people a week to assume there's another 500 that will come. We do no research. We don't do any marketing around people who don't come anymore. We just put out these veiled threats that people need to turn up to help. And I don't think it's as simple as that anymore. It's really interesting as well that we're talking about some traditional clubs that are struggling at the same time as 20,000 were at Denver, who were almost predominantly a new audience. Caplan have been lauded this week by Robert Elston. They've just got a crowd over 10,000. Whatever we think of Toronto, there's a steady 7,000 there every week, predominantly new fans. Coventry, I think, need appreciation of the record crowd. They got 1,500.
I was at that game. My friend Mike Shires, who's at Coventry, he invites me once a year, and I went down to watch. It was a great day. There was 1,465 were there. It was a lovely day.
I think you'll bear out there were a lot of people from the Coventry region that went to that game because it was an event.
But they did. But the thing with Coventry is, and I applaud clubs who do this. They bring in X and they spend X minus 1. And they pay wages that they can afford.
It's not rocket science.
No, but the problem is, of course, that is reflective in the fact that they've only won one game this season. So that's great. And listen, Coventry did exactly the right thing, and they're trying to grow the business. And they've got 1,465 there. That was great. But of course, there's always that temptation. I'm not suggesting at Coventry, but there's a temptation at clubs, isn't there? Well, if we just spend that little bit more, take a chance, we could get promoted, and that's how the problem starts.
But isn't it why the debate that we should be having at the moment is not about the structure, but about the sport sustainability?
Right. Well, you're involved at Keighley, Garry, aren't you?
Yeah.
You know, what's the situation? I mean, because we saw that they were, you know, in desperate straits and just hours away from going out of business. I mean, you know, you know a bit more.
I'm not going to beat about the bush. You know, we're in a financial mess, and I say we need new investors from there. But again, it's just been mismanagement from the guys at the top. And I said the budget, from a point of view, we've been budgeting crowds around about 1,000, 1,200. Our average crowd is around about 5, 7, 8. We've got a decent side on the field, but we're inconsistent on the field. Yeah. The big ingredient is if you've got a bit of quality on that field from there and you're winning every week, people may come from there, but it's quite simple. We budgeted for crowds of between 1,000 and 1,200. We're not getting anywhere near that, and this is why we're becoming in the mess that we are in.
I think all of this as well feeds into the bigger conversation that's happening at the moment with the Super League clubs and their willingness to fund the game below Super League. Obviously, the whole championship all the way down through League One, there's a financial structure in there that is imbalanced in itself. But the fact is, and I had this a couple of years ago, there are semi-successful championship clubs who have been in Super League who, for every £1 they get through the turnstile, are getting £9 from the RFL in central disbursement. Is that a good spend of anybody's money? I think that's what Ian Lennigan and a lot of the the Super League owners are saying. You know, we've got to have a model that works better and separates the wheat from the chaff better than we've got right now. I think that this plays into that story about Super League.
Do you think it's coincidental though that, I mean, it's literally hot off the heels of the press conference you were hinting at there with Ian Lennigan and Eamon McManus and Simon Moran and Robert Elston, and then suddenly, within a matter of days, the clubs at the bottom end of the food chain, if you like, are all saying we're bankrupt, we haven't got any money. Well, is there a coincidence here?
I don't think it's a coincidence, no. but I don't think there's a plot, should I say, about it. I do think that it feeds into the Super League owners' argument.
One thing I would say, which again goes back to both what Danny and Garry were saying, yes, part of it is on the field. If you have a successful club, more people naturally will come. So how do we make clubs that are rooted?
They can't all win.
But the problem, one of the problems we've got at the moment is that clubs that are rooted in their communities, that probably are not going to be Super League entities in the near future, have nothing to play for. But why did we get rid of the League One Cup? Why did we get rid of the Northern Rail Cup?
Right, okay.
If you were a Keighley and you were putting in a 3 or 5 year plan for an investor, and the investor said, well, what am I going to get? And you said, well, you know, we could win some silverware, like Batley did in the Northern Rail Cup, had a massive impact on
I said
that particular
many
club.
years ago, and that there should be this Northern Rail Cup, but why isn't that played as a curtain raiser before the Challenge Cup final?
Absolutely.
You know, because in football, the lower league cup, which has many different guises and names, but it's a Wembley final.
Yeah.
And the non-league cups, the FA Vars and the FA Trophy, have a Wembley final.
Well,
so it's great for lower league players.
I agree as well, but unfortunately, it seems to be that the sponsors pull out, and if the sponsors pull out, the RFL don't back it, do they? You know, they don't maintain it if we don't get a sponsor.
I think if you had the prospect of, for example, Featherstone playing Barrow for a place at Wembley, Featherstone would be full.
Yes.
So I think it's behoving upon the game to look after all its constituent parts in what they are, rather than what they perhaps would like them to be.
Why that was.
But I also think you extend that, and the reason that some of the top Championship clubs are desperate to get in the top 4 is because of the way we disperse money at the moment. If you were to say that the Championship as it stands at the moment ends with a grand final,
right.
Let's say at a venue like Headingley, which is going to be redeveloped in an iconic rugby league venue,
years ago, of course.
And the winner gets £250,000. And on the undercard of that was the league. Not necessarily. Right. What I'm saying is, if we need to talk about building events. Right. On the undercard of that, you had the League One grand final.
Right. So
you've got 4 teams there playing in an atmosphere where trophies and money are given out.
But they had that, Phil, didn't they? That's not long ago since that did happen at Headingley.
But what I'm saying is, does promotion have to be attached to that?
It is particular to British sport, isn't it, that we're so caught up on promotion, relegation. Because the fact is that in the Championship, how many teams are there who realistically could survive in Super League? Well, Lee did it for a little while.
Toulouse.
Toulouse we'll see. Toronto certainly.
Featherstone.
Featherstone, Halifax.
London. I'm reading down the table here.
Any team that is part-time, by virtue
London
of
Broncos?
Part-time at the moment. Well, the problem with London Broncos is the perennial problem we have with London, that their best young players are now being picked off by Super League teams.
Okay, right.
I don't think that many of those sides, apart from Toronto, and possibly Lee, could realistically live well in Super League.
Right, but I mean, would it make any difference if you replaced, with all due respect, Salford, Widnes, Huddersfield with Toronto, Toulouse, Lee, Featherstone, Halifax, these kind of teams? Or is it? Are you just shuffling the chairs round at the bottom there?
On the deck chair of the Titanic, aren't you? I think, and I think we're all waiting slightly with bated breath to find out when and what Super League clubs are going to present to the rest of the sport in terms of the model they see for the future. Until we have that, we don't really have a lot to grasp onto and say, well, this could be the answer.
I think we're missing out a key element in all of this as well, and that is increasing participation, because you're only going to have those teams that you've just mentioned who are currently towards the bottom, and those who are coming up from the top of the Championship. We don't have access to a big enough player base. There's not enough youngsters staying in the game. You're not going to increase the quality levels and change that dynamic unless you have more people playing. And where are those players going to come from? It goes back to the same discussions we had about the Keithleys and the Whitehavens and the Barrows. Everybody knows about the sport in those places, and those who are playing are finite. Do we have to go to the Torontos, the Denvers, the Londons, wherever, to not only try and build a new market in terms of business, but get more players involved?
But aren't we, if you go to your Denvers, if you go to a New York, if you go to a Toronto, aren't you showing the kids that are playing at Milford and at Stanley and at Dewsbury Celtic and at Wigan St Pat's and at Pilkington Rex, wow, there's a big wide world out there. It's a bit bigger than Barrow, Whitehaven and Featherstone. We've got to give them some stardust.
And you were in Denver. What was the experience like for the players? Never mind the spectators that were drawn to the sport for the first time, who we desperately need to tell quickly when they can see their next live rugby league. I would imagine that the England players you spoke to were absolutely in awe of the experience.
It was an absolutely phenomenal trip. I mean, and to play in a place like the Mile High Stadium is every bit as awe-inspiring and life-enhancing as going to Wembley. And the fact is that the players loved it. It was a different experience, a different culture. It is one of those things that you tick off on your life box, and say, wow, we'd like to do this again. And sure, we had the 5,000 feet altitude argument. It was a particularly hot day. But you know what? All of those England players for sure backed up very well. And they came back, I would argue, better athletes and better individuals and for the experience.
And why did 1,000, 1,200 Castleford fans go to Caplan at the weekend? The only bit that they couldn't secure before they went was the 80 minutes they were going for. But again, going on the social media reaction, they've had a fantastic time. And you know, what can Keighley do in a lesser extent to have an event around every game?
Well, they used to have events because they were the first club to start off with the whole game day experience when Cougar Mania was in full swing in the 1990s.
York are another club that have proved that the marketing you can do on social media costs you nothing. So it's not even about anything you've got to build into your budget, it's how cleverly you do it.
So it isn't just the money, it's the creativity and the quality of the people in your organisation.
It's been smart in your organisation as well, Danny, is it? That's what it is.
But it's also knowing your market, and I worry that the clubs that we're talking about that are struggling at the moment don't even know their own local market.
Just on Toronto, who are certain to be in the top 4 and almost certain to be top, Toronto would be a threat to anybody that finishes in the bottom 4 of Super League, and I think actually will be odds on to be promoted. What opportunities does that provide for Super League, but what problems does it provide logistically for Super League as well? Is there a balancing act here?
There's definitely a scheduling problem for the start of next year, because the Super League starting as early as it does and the winter in Canada going as late as it is, that's a problem that's going to have to be worked around. Right. But listen, if these guys, if Robert Olsen is worth every one of his 400,000 or so pounds he reputedly gets, I think that shouldn't be beyond his, you know, sort of ability to say, right, we're going to have to make some accommodations here. And Toronto themselves, as they've always been, as they've shown, they're willing to kind of go the extra mile in terms of accommodating everybody else.
The Super 8s, middle 8s are interesting here because
would you make an accommodation for that?
And this is another reason why the Super League clubs will say, well, this is a farce, because somebody's going to have to travel to Toronto at almost 5 minutes' notice. Now, NFL clubs are coming to play at Spurs Ground and Wembley, but that's planned months in advance. To ask a sports outfit to say, right, you're going to Toronto in 3 days' time is very difficult, isn't it? Whereas if it's a season, as we know a season to be, all the fixtures are laid out, at least you've got some planning.
I think the boot's on the other foot as well with Toronto. Well, they're asking for a block of games in the 8s. You know, we are such a reactive rather than proactive
This should have been planned before, because
absolutely.
Anybody could have seen at the start of the season there was a fair chance Toronto were going to be in the top 4.
I refuse to believe that someone hasn't.
Right, do you?
I think there are issues. But the other thing is visas. We've seen that clubs that have had half a season's notice can't get their top 17 players over there.
That's down to just how shabby they run their organisations. Brian Noble is saying in my paper this week, there is no problem with visas.
Right.
It's just
so. Are you saying that Huddersfield? I'm just giving the bottom 4 as they are. Huddersfield, Salford, Holkart, and Widnes should already be getting visas for their players.
No.
Why not? Because they could all be playing Toronto away.
It don't take 6 months or 12 months, right?
Well, they haven't got 6 months, have they? It's next month. This month, isn't it? Hold on. No.
Yes. Beginning of next month.
But it's a matter of hours. It's a matter of days to get it sorted.
Is it really?
That's right.
Is it about having a full-time administration where you can put people on to sort this kind of thing out?
But the Super League clubs have that. You know, you can perhaps excuse, you know, a lower championship club who thinks, you know, is it your job today, is it my job today? But when you've got people like the Super League clubs have, this should not be an issue.
Right. But just broadly, so what will Toronto bring to a Super League party if they do get promoted? Because as I said, in my opinion, they're now more likely to be in next year's Super League than they are not to be. Right, so somebody should be doing some planning here. So what will they bring if they were promoted?
I would imagine the planning what they'll be doing now is looking at better quality of player, because I would imagine they'll be looking for 10 new players from there. So some players will be.
Do you think they'll be shopping at the top table by taking players? And I mean, like Man City can do, right, and signing players from Wigan, Leeds, Warrington, and say we're going to take him off you.
They'll be signing some significant NRL players.
Yeah,
they will.
I think they'll bring us a whole new market. I think they'll bring us a whole new market. I think they will add on every single level that you can to the competition that we have, home and away. You know, the TV deal that was signed literally the night before the game in Denver exposed rugby league to 60 million households. You know, when could we ever say that before? I just think that Toronto getting promoted would be the best news story we've had for a while.
Gives us another destination location, the possibility of a new TV deal, the fact that I think corporate sponsors who have businesses in both Canada and over here would be far more interested. But the other thing is, I think it gives the Super League clubs that are left the opportunity to seriously go and market a game they've never had before. So I don't buy any of this.
Event marketing?
Yeah, there's no away support. Look at what York did. There is.
Right, okay, well we shall see what happens. That's all we've got time for here. Just enough time to tell you about Toronto Wolfpack, who are live on Premier Sports this Saturday night in the UK. Sheffield Eagles are their opponents, 9:30 kickoff UK time, 9:15 on air. And for all the information on what's happening on this channel, go to www.freesports.tv. Well, that is all we've got time for on this week's edition of Rugby League Back Chat. So it's thanks to our guests, Danny Lockwood from League Weekly, Phil Caplan from 4020 Magazine, and the legend Garry Schofield. Next week, Dave Woods will be in the chair. I hope you'll join him and his guests then.